Welcome to Kscope Uncovered. I'm your Kscope20 conference chair, Kevin McGinley, and with me today in bright, almost sunny Wilmington, North Carolina is the president of ODTUG, Tim German. How you doing, Tim?
Good, thanks, Kevin.
Welcome. So we're here for the annual board meeting that takes place every year, and along with that there's some conference planning stuff sprinkled in with that. Normally I think we do this on site at the conference location in Boston, right? But given that it's January, we were advised to maybe go a little bit south in the in the United States, so we didn't run into any travel problems. But so you're newly elected president of ODTUG on the board. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
For anybody listening, talk a little bit about the board and what it means to be board president, and how does the board serve the community, and what is the sort of overall responsibility of the president?
Yeah, so I've been on the board for 3 years. Served on the conference committee before that as a content chair, and then previously as a track lead and a content team member. The board is composed of 9 members. We come from all different communities in ODTUG. All 4 communities are represented on the board at the moment. And collectively we have responsibility for strategy and planning for the organization. And obviously we're also involved with the conference, and the board. A couple of board members serve on the conference committee every year. The conference being a big part of what we do. And then we have an executive committee of 4 members taken from the board each year, elected by the board. The secretary, the treasurer, the vice president, and the president. We have term limits, so Natalie Delamar, who served as our president the last 3 years, has term limited out and stepped down, and I am her replacement.
Congratulations. Big shoes to fill. I don't envy you at all. Natalie was awesome for so long. And, so then, what, obviously there's stuff you can't talk about, and the board's sort of devising a strategy and whatnot. But what are some of the things that you're trying to oversee and make sure go effectively, and why this sort of annual planning event takes place? Yeah.
So I think first of all, from my perspective as president, we've always been, at least for the duration of my time on the board, we've been a very consensus-driven organization. So there's some responsibility with being the president, but we also, we talk everything through together, all 9 of us, collectively agree strategy and so on. And I think this is a time of change in the industry and for our members. And I think, for some of our communities, we're actually unusual in the technology space, in that we have not experienced change at the rate that people in some corners of the technology world do. I think, in some areas of technology, learning a completely new language would have happened multiple times over the 20 years or so that I've been in the industry, whereas I'm still working with a product that was released in 1992. And the Oracle database itself goes back way further than that, and people are still writing code that could have been written in the early 80s in some cases.
Right.
So, but I think we all know in all 4 of our communities, we're experiencing more radical change than we've seen in different ways, but more radical change than we've seen in a long time. And I think the major responsibility of the board at the moment is to navigate that on behalf of our membership and make sure we continue to serve their interests and needs.
Awesome. So we are, this is Kscope Uncovered, so I like to talk about what's sort of going on in the conference planning process right now, and you are actually one of the board members who sits on our conference committee calls and participates, gives us guidance from a board perspective on planning the end-to-end conference. So some things that are going on right now. We have finalized our schedule, so we always have to look at how we're going to arrange all the sessions and when things start and end and how long breaks are and when certain events fall and what time they start, because our vendors need to know all that information, our attendees need to know all that information, and that helps us when we go to plan all of what sessions are going to go into what slots. It's nice to have a shell there to put everything in. So we finalized that. We have gone ahead and all of our content teams right now have finished voting on all of the abstracts that are in place. So for everybody that doesn't know, there are selection teams across all of the tracks. Their role is to review every single abstract, rate them. There are multiple members on each selection team, so the teams then get together and talk about their votes, the aggregate vote, how that relates to specific sessions that certain people want to advocate for, and so they're going through the beginnings of that process right now. They've gotten all their votes in, and now they'll start talking about them. We've also started looking at our keynote speakers for the general session. So every year we get a list of possible keynote speakers, and we go through and watch a whole bunch of videos. I don't know if you have started that process yet, but I know I've been looking at a lot of videos, and we try to, pick a sort of new, interesting, dynamic speaker. Try to find something new each year to entertain the people during the general session. Thinking back to past Kscopes, is there a keynote speaker that sticks out in your mind that resonated with you in any way, shape, or form? And it doesn't have to be necessarily your favorite or the best or whatever, but is there one that sort of jumps to mind when you think back fondly? Which actually, before you answer that, I should ask, what was your first Kscope? Because I usually do this with most of my guests.
2010 in Washington, D.C.
Washington, okay.
Yeah, so I got involved not entirely by chance, but we noticed, being a co-worker, noticed that this Oracle-related conference was happening in D.C. when I happened to live in D.C.
Oh, okay.
And
that's cool.
I walked to the conference every day.
That's awesome.
Through Rock Creek Park. And I've been every year since, and it's just a remarkable experience that's really changed my professional life.
Okay, so you predate me a little bit. Long Beach was my first one.
Oh yeah, not by much.
Not by much,
yeah.
but yeah, that's and who knows? Maybe someday we'll go back to DC. But I would have loved to gone to DC. I think that would be really cool. But okay, so we have roughly the same window then of keynote speakers. What ones stick out to you?
So I enjoyed last year.
Yes, very entertaining.
Yeah.
We were, while you're thinking, and I'll tell a little story, we were a little worried at first about picking a magician, because it can be a little bit, some magicians can be really good, others can be, kind of cheesy, right? And so we were a little worried about picking a magician, but I think overall I was incredibly pleased with how that went.
Yeah.
And he was thought-provoking and highly entertaining at the same time, and I thought that was pretty cool.
So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed Heather Knight.
Yep.
I think it was the year before, 2018.
Yeah,
maybe?
she was. Yep. That she stands out as one of my favorites as well.
Yep.
Just because robotics to me is super cool, and the fact that someone's even remotely thinking about what's it like for a human to interact with a robot is, we all want to focus on the robot side of things and the technology side of that, but the idea of how we're going to interact with robots as humans is pretty cool.
Yeah. I enjoyed the guy from The Onion, whose name I'm struggling to remember right now.
Scott
somebody.
Dickens? No. Yeah, I don't remember. That's a good.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. Like we don't all enjoy the same thing.
Right. So, exactly. Yes. Everybody has different tastes.
And it's fun that we get somebody. We typically, I mean, Heather Knight is vaguely technology related, but obviously not in our space.
Yep.
I think it's fun that and a good thing that we get somebody from outside of our space, to talk about something completely different, partly because it's entertaining, but also it's meaningful it resonates with people in a different way to just talking about their day job from a technology practitioner perspective.
Absolutely.
So it's a very interesting process choosing those people each year.
Yeah, and we do try as much as we can to, not necessarily duplicate the same thing as last year. That's not always, a couple times we've had more inspirational speakers, other times we have more sort of funny speakers, other times we get into more technology centric. It does vary in sort of tone and style, and we try not to just sort of regurgitate the same thing every year after year, but it is tough to please, 1,000 plus people, right? And everybody always has different tastes and, what they gravitate to, and but it is also a fun part of the process. I in all my years on the conference committee look forward to that discussion around, okay, what speaker are we going to pick and why, and what features or elements are we going to focus on this year that are more important for whatever reason. And I always found that to be a fun part of the conference planning, is picking that keynote speaker. So I'm very curious. I don't usually announce what day we're recording here in the podcast, but our next conference committee meeting will be talking about all the different keynote speaker options. So I'm very curious to see what the rest of the group, who they gravitated to and who resonates.
Yeah, in 4 days' time.
Exactly. We're also in the middle of content selection. So this is an incredibly important time for the conference, because content is, the most important part of Kscope.
It's the core of it.
It's the core of it, right? Yeah. So you were a content chair.
Yeah.
Talk. What are our teams going through right now? What are things that they're thinking about? What are areas that they're focused on and trying to make Kscope the best that it can be?
Yeah, so I make no apology for repeating myself on this, but I feel that the content teams, they do their work 6 months ahead of the conference. They get done, or 5 or 6 months ahead of the conference they get done, and it's easy to forget that they did all this work, but it is a huge amount of work. Some of the tracks at the conference get well over 100 submissions. There's something like 100 plus volunteers working on those track teams. They are reviewing every single one of those abstracts. It is an enormous amount of work that they do.
Yeah.
And entirely for the benefit of the community. And they're reading all of those abstracts, they're voting on them. There's also the whole public voting that we now do.
Yep.
Where people outside of the track teams are welcome to come and express their opinion about what they want to see at the conference, which is really useful feedback for us.
It is.
We were looking at the track team voting stats today. There's more than 5,000 votes,
right, yeah.
Which means 5,000 read-throughs of an abstract and the summary. That's a lot of work.
It is.
It's a lot of work that people are doing to produce, to make sure that we select the most relevant, best possible content for the conference. I feel very grateful to the people that are doing all that work.
Yeah, and it's awesome to see too. I have the fortune of seeing all of these tracks going through this at the same time, and the questions that they ask each other, and the thoughts that they pose on Slack of I think this or I think that, and it is fantastic to see the level of engagement that all the teams have in this, because it shows how seriously they take this. That this is not just some sort of a whim. Deciding on the content, and while one can certainly, on any given year, say they liked this session or didn't like that session. I think it's just incredible how much hard work and passion that all of our volunteers, over 100 committee members put into this process.
Yeah.
I should have asked you this ahead of time. This is always when I had Opal on a couple episodes ago. There were a couple times where I asked her a question and I didn't give her a heads up ahead of time about it, and she was like, "Well, that's interesting." But no, did you put in any sessions? Did you put in to speak? Because you and I have been speakers in the past. I did not, so I'm curious. Did you put in anything this year?
I did. I submitted one session,
okay,
co-presenting with someone else, and we'll see how it does.
Yes.
I think being on the board, and especially being the president now, the conference is a little different than being an attendee and a speaker.
Yep.
People may not be aware that at the conference we have a lot of meetings with our Oracle counterparts about where their products are going and providing feedback from the community to product management and so on. So I don't want to overcommit myself.
Yes, I'm in the same boat, and I was actually educating one of the teams on that we have throughout the conference these meetings with all the different teams at Oracle to talk about sort of what's important to ODTUG, what's important to Oracle, and try to make sure those things mesh together as best as possible.
Yeah.
And that takes up a lot of our time, so it is kind of hard to plan to have speaking time. It's not impossible, but I personally, potentially like you, made the choice to kind of dial that speaking element down just because of all that goes into those meetings throughout the conference. And for those of you out there that are maybe wondering why you don't see certain people more during the conference or in sessions or whatever, that's partly the reason, is because we're actually attending other things while the conference is going on. So it's definitely something that each person on the board and the conference committee has to weigh, how much they get involved in one side of that or the other. But so we're in the middle of choosing all of the sessions. I think as we look out at the sort of schedule coming up here, we've got the teams will be having their calls to debate and discuss what sessions. Usually there's a number of sessions that sort of the cream rises to the top, and these are the no-brainers ones that they're going to pick. But then there's a lot of debate on sort of the rest of those, filling out the track. And
absolutely, yeah. I think it's the voting on the sessions. We don't simply vote and then take
just the raw score, right?
The top 40 or however many slots you have in the track. There is a lot of debate and argument to make sure that important topic areas are all covered, to make sure there's a mix of material for different levels of expertise and so on. And just again, I talked about how much work there was involved in just reading and voting, but actually this is only the beginning of the selection process. And there's there's a lot of attention paid to that second step and making sure that we pick really choose what we think is the best possible lineup. People get very passionate in the debate about which sessions to select.
It is, and I'm always pleased to see that it's diplomatic passion, but
it's collegial.
It's right. And we have to take into account a variety of factors. Like we can't have one person speaking the entire track of a conference, right? We have to balance across all of our possible speakers and companies that those speakers work for. So there's a variety of angles that we have to look at this from, and so there's a lot of work that goes into that. So those teams will submit their proposals for the track to the conference committee, and then it's up to the chairs to sort of sign off on all of those choices. And sometimes we have to look across all the tracks and make sure that things are balanced in the right way when we take it up a level from just looking at a singular track to looking across the whole conference.
Yep.
And that's a little bit of an intensive process in its own right. We have a long meeting on a Sunday typically where we sit down and look at that all holistically before we send out all of our speaker acceptances and whatnot. But yeah, so that's where we are in the process right now. And I think we've got some other things coming up with regards to deciding some other elements of the conference that I'll maybe talk about in some future episodes here. But yeah, so Kscope in Boston, are you looking forward to anything fun in Boston to try to do, or what's any angles there that you're excited about being in Boston?
I always enjoy city locations. I like being able to leave the conference
and walk around. Yeah,
walk around. So yeah, that's always fun. Boston is not a city I know well at all, but it seems from our visits that it's very walkable, and in July it's going to be lovely.
Yes,
hopefully, or June rather, it's going to be lovely.
Late June,
late June, early July.
This is probably the latest Kscope that I've
It's the
ever
latest
attended.
I can remember, yeah.
So we are going to literally, and we probably could not have planned this any better, we are literally going to end Kscope and head right into 4th of July weekend.
Yeah.
Being in Boston. I know I'm actually going to stick around for 4th of July, so that's, I don't know if you've ever watched the sort of TV specials and whatnot on the 4th of July, but the Boston Pops and all the fireworks shows that they have, I'm looking forward to seeing those in person. So I'm super excited for Kscope in Boston. I think it's going to be great.
Me too.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on this, Tim. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Good luck being president of the ODTUG board. That's a huge responsibility, and the user group is in great hands. Appreciate you being on today.
Well, thank you.
All right. For Kscope Uncovered, I'm your Kscope20 conference chair, Kevin McGinley. Thanks, everyone, for listening.